just go for it? Okay. Today we are joined by Rob Brown from the Cooperative Development Institute. We'll be diving into exit planning for rural business owners, which includes a heavy focus on employee ownership. Rob is a nationally recognized expert in the field of employee ownership transitions and has assisted dozens of businesses to explore, assess, structure, and execute transitions to worker-owned cooperatives. And if there's anything else he wants to share about himself, I will let him do that. His bio was quite long, and I just would love to leave it up to him if there's anything else he thinks is relevant. And just on a personal note, one of our employees of Hannah Grimes, Sarah Powell, is actually participating in a fellowship that he is leading about this topic, which is kind of how we got engaged in this. And it's a 9-month fellowship. And it's for folks who support businesses and to help them learn how to have conversations about exit planning, and then specifically how to assist them if they're interested in transitioning to employee ownership. And so probably during the Q&A time, I might ask a couple more questions of him about that, because I've just been really impressed with the strategy and model that they're using to execute this fellowship and to get this information out there in the world. And at Radically Rural, we are all about replicating models and elevating resources and ideas that work. And so we might dive into that a little bit more in the Q&A. So without further ado, I will let Rob take it away.
Thanks, Juliana. Thank you all for your interest in this. This is gonna be about the most superficial touch I can do on two pretty complicated topics, but it's just meant to give you something to chew on, some thoughts to think about as you advocate and provide services in rural communities, and possibly some examples of other interesting rural initiatives that I think are interesting that might be an example for you to look to around next steps. So in that order, I've got some slides to keep me on track and to concisely convey some information. So I don't think I need to get into anything more around bio. A few things around CDI when we get into this, but let me just share my screen. And yeah, so everyone can see that? Heads nodding? Yes, great.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So move these out of the way. So yeah, we're going to talk a bit about exit planning for business owners, the challenge, the opportunity, and how it fits in with, like I said, advocates and service providers in rural regions who want to, as Radically Rural's mission points out, sustain rural economies and rural communities. So part of what I do at CDI, Cooperative Development Institute, is a lot of very introductory exit planning seminars, webinars, workshops. Usually
a lot of yawning going on over there.
If everyone could mute themselves, that'd be great. I'm always doing that in partnership with an economic development group, a community development group, a chamber of commerce, a trade association. They're the ones hosting an event. I'm showing up to provide some information to their members or to their region, to business owners or who show up at exit planning webinars. So this is the framing that I use around this to get business owners to just start thinking seriously about the need for this. And it's this idea around planning for tomorrow, because as you'll see, if you don't plan in advance, you just don't have an exit plan, and oftentimes liquidation and closure, which is particularly for rural communities, the worst option, right? Like one pizza shop, one small restaurant, one small hardware store in a major metropolitan region liquidates and closes, and somebody else moves in, or people have other options. When that happens in a small rural community, it can be really detrimental. So I myself am from rural Maine, very rural Maine. So, I do take the rural advantages in this very seriously and know from personal experience how this can impact communities. But so this is the basic framing, this idea around planning for tomorrow, and this three-step process really to get business owners thinking about this idea. You have to know what you want, you have to know your options, and then you have to achieve your goals. And I guess in somewhat more high-minded language, you could say there's the visioning phase, there's the assessment phase, and there's the implementation phase. And that's really how exit planning needs to be approached. So let's dig in. Where's my... There we go. So just a little bit more about CDI. We ourselves are a nonprofit organization, a 501c3. We've been around for 30 years. We are the USDA designated Northeast Center for Cooperative Business Development. So we're sort of like an SBDC for co-ops. And we work all throughout the Northeast, practical, technical assistance, training, education, development programs and such. That's our bread and butter. The program that I run, Business Ownership Solutions, works with existing businesses to explore and assess and execute transitions to worker cooperatives, worker buyouts. We don't work with startups, we just work with existing businesses, and hence the heavy focus for us on like being able to do some education and training and promotion around the issue of exit planning itself, because that ends up being the entry point, the point of interest for business owners in this, because they're actually thinking about what to do with their business. We provide a lot of services from, we work with businesses over a long period of time, everything from that first exploration phase to financial assessments and business valuations. We work with that group of workers throughout that process to develop their knowledge, their business plan, their financial education, transaction structuring. We are not lenders, but we have close relationships with lenders and capital providers to finance those buyouts. And then post-transaction, we continue to work with those new worker cooperatives, old businesses, but new worker cooperatives that own them to help them be successful over time. So we engage with the business over quite a long time horizon. And so here's the challenge. And I think for the, particularly in rural areas, this should not be a surprise to you, I hope. This is from the Business Enterprise Institute, the National Trade Association, essentially, of Certified Exit Planners, from their biannual survey showing the retirement intentions of business owners. So if you'll notice, this is nationally, nearly 3/4 of business owners are thinking they're going to retire in the next 5, 6, 7 years. And then also just nationally, and that is because nationally business owners, over half of business owners are over age 50, but in rural regions, they're over age 60. And I just want to point out, I can speak for Maine, where I'm from, and the average age of the population in rural Maine is more than a generation greater than the average age in major metropolitan regions in this country. And I'm sure that is true for many rural regions around the country. So this issue is all the more acute and growing in rural regions. And why this matters, I just kind of got into it. Just in the Northeast alone, there are over 200,000 small businesses with employees where the owner is nearing retirement. We know that from census data. And here's the problem. Very few of those business owners actually have engaged in succession planning, in exit planning, and have a documented exit plan. They want to retire. They're saying they're going to retire. They have some vague idea of what they think is going to happen, but they're not doing anything to actually plan for it to happen as they want it to happen on the timeline they want it to happen on. So that's the problem. Lots of business owners who are aging and think they're going to retire in the near future, but they're not putting the time and effort into the work that needs to be done for them to do it successfully. And they don't know who to turn to ask questions, and they don't even know which questions to ask. So that's where our intervention is trying to move the needle. First is on that point. And for those business owners that are just have the vague idea, they don't realize that only 20% of business listings ever sell, and only 15% of family transitions actually succeed. And both of those numbers are going down. The success rate of those numbers are going down, particularly family transitions. This is a Northeast data point that I know, for every business that sells, 9 liquidate and close. And then the smaller and more rural the business, the greater the likelihood of liquidation and closure when an owner does retire. So all of these things matter nationally. I think these things matter much more and more acutely and more imminently in rural areas. And all of this adds up to what is many people refer to as the silver tsunami, this aging baby boomer business owner demographic that want to retire. They're thinking about retiring, but they don't know how to do it, and they don't know who to turn to for help. And so that is what we're, as I said, both the challenge and the potential opportunity around business preservation and wealth building for workers. So just to run through a little bit about the exit planning part. So again, this first issue, defining your goals, knowing what you want. And I always like to throw out the phrase, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. And I think for a lot of business owners, that's where they're at. They don't know where they're going. They don't have goals set. And so they're just going to wind up, fate is going to overtake them. As one of our clients likes to say, you're going to retire from your business by design or by default. And so you want to do it by design. So some of the factors that cause failure, as I've said, lack of planning, no proper planning, no planning at all. Just that failure to identify objectives and both financial and non-financial objectives and goals for yourself, your business, your family, your own retirement income that you are probably relying on that business to provide in a sale. There could be liquidity issues. It's really important for business owners to invest in their business. But if you invest in that major expansion and you think you're going to retire in a couple of years, you have not paid down that debt and realized the return on that investment. And you could actually owe more money than what the business is worth. So timing is important there. And we've seen that a number of times. Family succession issues, which I'm going to touch on a few of these more in more detail later. The inadequate successor management. So have you trained up a management team, a manager or management team that can operate that business in your absence? The leadership development, if you built your bench. Some business owners, a lot of business owners, honestly, have a really unrealistic idea about business value. Some are really lowballing themselves. They're really undervaluing what their business could be worth. Most are overvaluing it. They think their business is worth quite a bit more than what it actually is. And so that can be a real shock. So the sooner you have some sense of that, and when you plan 3 to 5 years in advance, you can actually bend business value over that amount of time if you set your mind to it. And then after all is said and done, it could be just improper deal structure. Perhaps the company is over leveraged, the management team was not as well developed as you claimed. There can be lots of things that can go wrong even after you've tried to execute your exit. So that's just a few things to think about. These are questions that business owners need to be asking themselves, considerations they need to be taking account of, or some things like that. This next idea about understanding your options, outside of liquidation and closure, anything somebody does with a business falls into one of 3 big buckets. It's either arm's length transaction, open market sale, it's the business is going to someone within their family, or it's going to someone within the firm. There are no other options. Everything falls within one of those buckets. So if you're talking about an outside sale, oftentimes it can be the cleanest break and the most money up front, because somebody is financing it themselves. They have their own proceeds. They're leveraging the business they already own to buy your business. But generally, it's a cleanest break and the most proceeds up front, but not always. And it's not nearly as easy as business owners think. Engaging a business broker, making sure you have the right business broker who puts the right value on it and markets it effectively to the right audiences, that is not easy. And also just to say, it is a buyer's market. The number of businesses that are being put out for sale is growing. The number of people interested in buying businesses is going down. So it's really a supply and demand issue at that point. And that in itself will impact business value. Particularly with outside sales, I think the most important thing to think about is the impact on employees, customers, and vendors. Once a business owner markets a business, and has not cultivated their employees, customers, and vendors to understand what they're doing and how and when, all of a sudden everybody is developing a plan B. Your best employees, nobody knows what the future is going to bring, and nobody likes that, right? So your employees, your customers, your vendors, they're like, I hope this works, but I need to have a backup plan. So that can really be disruptive to business during the course of marketing a business. And then there's a lot of options within an outside sale. You could be working with a business broker. You could be talking to a competitor, a friendly competitor who owns a business like yours. Could be someone in the value chain, either a big customer, a big vendor who really values your place in their supply chain, and they might be considering buying that business. So there's a lot of different options within that sort of more arm's length transaction. But it's generally, that's it, that it's some sort of arm's length outside transaction. For family transitions, as I said, they're becoming less common. I suppose there was a time where young people took over the family business because that's what was expected to do, and that's what they did. But that is not the world we live in anymore. And people are living longer, so their children are that much older, and they're off in their own lives. You know, the lawyer in Chicago is not going to move back to rural Maine to take over the family hardware store almost shortly, right? So it's just becoming less common for some obvious reasons if you think about that. You're certainly introducing all sorts of new layers of complexity and emotion. It's family. There can be unintended tax consequences, which are not that big a deal, but again, they just need to be taken account of, particularly around gift taxes and possibly, but rarely, estate tax issues. It's really the gift tax issue that you have to plan well in advance for around family transitions. And then the last one, which family members and in which capacity? If you have 3 children and you say, my kids are going to take it over, really? Like, which one? How? Like, is one going to run it? Are all 3 going to run it? Are they just going to be passive owners of a business and there's a management structure in place? That can introduce all sorts of uncomfortable topics in a family for a parent to think about their own children and have very uncomfortable conversations with their children and feel like they're making judgments or picking favorites. And that's a topic a lot of people don't want to engage in. So that's that idea of like which family members and in what capacity is really the most emotionally charged, complicated issue that comes up in family transitions. And then employee transitions, there could be entrepreneurial acquisitions, what we call entrepreneurial acquisitions, cultivating and coaching a younger employee to take over and really supporting them from the inside. It could be a senior management buyout. There are employee stock ownership plans, ESOPs. We're not going to even touch that today because they just don't apply to most businesses. And then worker-owned cooperatives, which I'm going to explain in a little bit more detail. But the idea here is that your employees are very vested in the success of that business because it is their livelihood, and they know your business and they know your customers best. So why not consider that? And then this final step, this implementation phase, this execution phase around achieving your goals, a few key factors. The first things I say to business owners is you need to think like a buyer, right? The person who is buying your business is not valuing the blood, sweat, and tears over decades that you have put into that business. They care about the cash flow. They care about the customer list. They care about the really practical, profitable elements of that business. And so you have to pull all your emotion out of it. And business owners are very emotional about their businesses because that's where they've invested enormous amounts of their time and energy over many years. So you got to think like a buyer. You got to develop your leadership. You have to build your bench. You have to, ideally, you're making yourself dispensable to that business. If that business can run itself and you can go to Florida for a couple of months, you have demonstrated that that business is of a higher value than if it is solely reliant on you in every aspect. You have to have the right team to help you with legal, financial, tax, exit planning, and other advisors. And for many small businesses, you need to separate your personal finances from your business finances. No more running the family vacation through the books. No more running the home heating oil through the books, right? Like there are so many things, and we're not the IRS. I don't care. but you got to clean that stuff out. Because what you're doing is you're minimizing the profitability of the business so that you can avoid taxes. But then when you go to sell the company, you have minimized the profitability of the business, which is what the value is based on. So you have actually robbed your own retirement to avoid taxes, is what you've effectively done by doing that over time. And then the last point, I touched on it, take a long vacation. Again, if you can go to Florida, go someplace warm and sunny for several months in the winter, and the business continues to run itself, and you can demonstrate that, that says a lot about the value of the business and its ability to sustain itself going forward. Just do a time check. Okay. So a little bit about worker cooperatives. It is the option, like, as I said, we do a lot of exit planning, sort of introductory exit planning webinars and workshops and such. Much more information than what I just gave, and tools and resources for business owners to use or think about, or to assess their own situations. But what I am doing is wanting to introduce the concept of worker cooperative transitions, worker buyouts, because it tends to be the option that business owners understand the least, or perhaps have never even heard of. I will point out, last time I looked, if you go to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce website, the only thing they have to say about exit planning is get a business broker or liquidate and close. So that's from our national blue chip advocate for business in the United States. That's what they offer for exit planning assistance on their website. So one would think those who serve businesses would be able to better engage with business owners on these topics, but it is only recently, that's only recently becoming true, where more and more folks are coming to me and saying, can you help us do better by our businesses? So a little bit about worker cooperatives. This is a quote from Entrepreneur Magazine that I like to use, just because it's succinct. It's this is the buyer that's right under your nose. They care about the business. They rely on it for their livelihood. They know your customer base. They know your operations. This doesn't need to be an opportunity of last resort. It may be, but you should at least consider it and explore it equally with any other potential option, because it could really serve your interests and your goals really well. And then just to say, employee ownership is good for business. Employee-owned companies create more jobs in the good times. They lay off fewer people in the bad times. They're more productive and more profitable. Lots of studies show all this, show lower rates of bankruptcy, closure, and loan default. There is something to the model of employee ownership that makes businesses more sustainable, more profitable, more resilient. And that is exactly what a lot of rural communities need, are businesses that are going to last, right? And then also, employee ownership is good for workers. This is the top piece here is from a very large longitudinal study tracking 18 to 35-year-olds over time that showed young workers in employee-owned companies had better retention and attraction rates, higher median wages, higher household wealth, longer job tenure. Also, something really important to rural communities around youth retention or youth attraction. Employee-owned companies offer that. So into worker cooperatives, what is a worker cooperative? Any cooperative, the basic definition of cooperative is the same across all different types of cooperatives, but for a worker cooperative, it's a business that's jointly owned and democratically controlled by its workers and that operates for the benefit of its workers. So we could be talking about electric cooperatives, which lots of rural regions are served by electric co-ops. That is a business that is jointly owned and controlled by its ratepayers, homeowners, businesses, right? That's called a consumer cooperative. There are lots of producer cooperatives, again, particularly in rural areas, dairy, grain, lots of co-ops. Here in Maine, we got lobster co-ops. They control a third of the lobster industry in Maine. And it's the same basic definition. It's people who start some sort of business enterprise to benefit themselves, and they operate it for their own benefit. And so for a worker cooperative, this is how that definition works. A couple of basics. One of the great things around the work that we do is that the owner is creating a ready-made market for the business. They're making an opportunity available to their own workers to do that. And there's a lot of advantages to that, which I'll get at in just a minute. Most worker cooperatives, particularly how we structure them, they are corporations, but they're not the type of corporation that you typically imagine, which is a capital-based corporation. Someone owns 50%, someone owns 10%, someone owns 5%. That's a capital-based corporation. It's a corporation whose ownership is based on the capital invested by those owners. This is a membership-based corporation. And by that, we mean this idea of one member, one share, one vote. So if you are a member of a worker cooperative, you buy one share, and you can only buy one share, and you can buy that share because you work there. And that gives you one vote in matters that the bylaws of the corporation allow for. It could be the election of a board, it could be the passage of a budget, it could be the hiring of management. There's a series of governance level, ownership level decisions. Could be around strategic plans or acquisition, moving a business, right? Like bigger picture, strategic plan type things. That is not necessarily to say that there is one vote in the management of the company, like the operational day-to-day, week-to-week management. All of our companies that we work with have general managers, CEOs. They look for all intents and purposes like a regular business in that regard. It just so happens that the people who work there are the shareholders of that business. This is an important point I always want to stress. Workers don't have to be owners, and owners have no guarantee of employment, right? So, rarely when we're working with a business, do 100% of the employees choose to become owners of the business. Maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 2/3, maybe it's 3/4, but it's usually somewhere between half and 3/4, typically. And for everyone else who, for whatever reason, it doesn't make sense for them, or they're interested, they just keep doing their job, same job as the old job, and there's just a new ownership structure of the company. So, and the flip side of that, of course, is that just because you're an owner doesn't mean you have any guarantee of employment. It's still business. You still have to offer a good product or service at a competitive price in a viable market, right? It's still business, and businesses take hits in some years, and sometimes people get laid off, right? So just to say there's no guarantee of employment there. And the financial benefit to those members is that they get a share of the annual net income. That could be through cash, or it could be through equity in the business that they build up over time. So that's just a little bit about the worker cooperative basics. And I'm happy to dig into any of that more in questions and answers if you have more questions about worker cooperatives, what they are, how they work. But that's just a couple of the basics as we present them. I always get the question, who's a good candidate for this? Is my business a good candidate for this? And a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I always say a profitable business is the good candidate for this, because for your workers to buy that business, they should be asking all the same questions and doing all the same due diligence as anybody who would buy your business. And that's all about track record, right? Stability, cash flow, leadership, legacy, market, customers, vendors and suppliers, workforce. The longer the track record, the more stable and profitable the track record, the better it is. And it doesn't matter if you're, a cafe or a manufacturer, or if there's 5 workers or 50 workers. If it has got a great track record of making money, creating jobs, stable market, stable cash flow, it's worth considering. So I want to give you a few examples of a few businesses that we've worked with. And I'm going to move really quickly through these. And if anybody has any questions about any of them in particular, feel free to ask. But just to give you a sense of a couple of stories and sector, a diversity of sector and size and such. There's this idea around immediate exit. That's not what we want. That the whole point of what we're doing is to avoid that. We want people to plan. So then there's the phased exit. And then there's this idea of restructuring for growth, where it's not really about exit. It's generally about mid-stage entrepreneurs who've built a company and are not going anywhere, but they want to restructure the company because they want a more personally sustainable lifestyle, and they want to vest their employees for retention purposes, for growth purposes, and so forth. So first example, the Island Employee Cooperative. Some of you may have heard of this in the past. This is a long-standing worker cooperative, 11 or 12 years old. This was one of the largest employers in a very rural, very remote region. It's actually an island off a very long peninsula up the coast of Maine. This is one of the largest employers on the island. They own a large grocery store in one village, a medium-sized grocery store in another, and then an Ace Hardware. And one couple owned these businesses for 43 years and never did anything to plan because just thought they'd get a business broker and they'd take care of it for them. And 2 years after getting a business broker, they were still waiting. So one thing led to another and they were introduced to me. At this point, this business owner was really, they wanted out. They were very frustrated. This moved too fast. It would have been much better if there was a lot more planning and education and training to go along, but we got it done. It was complicated, but this is a good example. Large, complicated, multi-sites, grocery, retail, very rural, very remote. It's another example, sort of immediate exit. Liberty Graphics is a pretty well-known silkscreen manufacturer in rural Maine. Again, 40-some-odd-year-old company. The owner kept talking about how he wanted the employees to own the company someday when he was ready to retire, but never actually did anything. And it actually caused a lot of problems because he was making promises but not explaining them or taking any steps to fulfill them. And you can imagine what that did within the workforce over time. So about 45 or so employees here, again, rural Maine, manufacturing, very nationally famous for their like super high quality t-shirts and the artwork of their on the t-shirts. Lots of museums get their t-shirts from Liberty Graphics as one example. Home Beautiful, this is in upstate New Hampshire. Again, rural region, but a wealthier region, mostly with summer homes in the Lakes region. And this is a business that really caters to that market for home finishes. You can see all the things that they sell and design services. But again, about 20 employees. This is a business owner who did everything, had the management team. He was in Florida 5 months of the year. Let the business run itself. These people knew how to run this business really well. And so it was really the ownership transition around the worker cooperative buyout went quite well because they really had their ducks in a row operationally. This is an Ace Hardware in a very small town in New York. Very small company. This company was started by Ralph's parents as a Western Auto in the early 60s. He didn't want anything to do with it. He wanted to be a teacher. So he left, became a teacher. Then his parents passed away and he wound up owning it anyway, but with no planning. And then that was in the early 70s. And he tried to sell the business about once a decade and it just, nobody wanted it. So again, one thing led to another and he was introduced to me and now the employees own it and he's been able to retire. Ward Lumber, another example, lumber and building materials dealer in upstate New York, up in the Adirondacks. Fourth generation business with no fifth generation for the business to go to. So this is another example, bigger, much more complicated transaction. This is a fifth generation insurance brokerage in rural Maine with a couple of offices. W.J. Wheeler, this company was started before the Civil War. But again, fifth generation with no sixth generation interested in the insurance business. And so now these workers own this. So again, a very different sector and about 14 or 15 employees. And then this is I mentioned restructuring for growth. This was like a 40-something landscape designer who had a landscaping company. And for here, it was skilled trades, really wanted to vest her employees and make her life more sustainable. So this is in the Hudson River Valley, New York, and about 20 or so employees, I think. So there's advantages, there's challenges, as you can imagine. I'll send around the slide deck, and if you have questions, we can get into this. The one advantage I do want to focus in on, I hinted at it before, is just this idea of the flexible, friendly insider sale. You can really control the timing and the process and the timeline of this. You can start it, you can stop it. You can make the work done fit the ebb and flow of your own business. So it makes it really a good idea in that regard. That's a great advantage that I just wanted to point out in particular. I'm going to skip over this and just to say, the basic process is the process anybody would go through in buying a business that we go through with a group of workers. There's an explore phase, like you're really trying to figure out, does this seem like a good idea? First blast, first pass. Assessment, financial assessment, business assessment, really understanding the business, the financials. We do a lot of financial education at this point. If all looks good, we're talking to lenders, we're talking to a lawyer, we're helping develop transaction documents to structure the transaction. We're finalizing that transaction. As I said at the outset, we continue to work with those worker cooperatives that now own a business for usually a couple of years, at least 2 or 3 years after they've bought the business. This I wanted to point out, if I'm guessing fair number of folks in this community know the Adirondack North Country Association. If you don't, you should. They're a really impressive rural Adirondack North Country, New York community development, economic development group that does a lot of different stuff in a very large region. But one of the things they do is the Center for Businesses in Transition. So I just put this up here as an example. You can look this up. It's got its own website. They're really doing a lot to organize a robust network of partners, from chambers of commerce to SBDC people to trade association people who touch businesses, to really drive exit planning, education, information, and assistance and tools throughout business owners in the Northeast. They are not committed, singularly committed to worker cooperatives. They put it out there as an option, but they're really focused on preservation of businesses and jobs in the rural communities of the Adirondack. So I think this is a great model for particularly rural regions to think about, because you can't do anything without partners in rural areas, right? Everything has to be done in partnership often. And then just one more resource. This is a website that we put together. It's ownershiptransition.org. I can put the link in the chat. But this is really meant to be a one-stop resource for people around for business owners and service providers to understand and educate themselves around exit planning, the steps, the options. There's a 3-part video series. It's kind of a DIY tutorial that has a lot of interview footage with certified exit planners and business owners who've gone through selling their businesses. And so it's a really educational website that anybody could put on their website or promote on social media in their regions to sort of boost business owner interest and awareness around exit planning. So that's that. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was wonderful. Nice work with a lot of information in a short period of time, and thank you for leaving time for discussion as well. So I'm just going to let participants jump in with any questions that they have. You can either raise your hand, put questions in the chat, whatever's easiest for you. I am comfortable with silence.
I do.
Go ahead, Kate.
Hi, Juliana. Thanks so much for the presentation. I have a question about when do you start working with the current business owner? So, for example, in my community, we recently had a business that had been almost 100 years in business, had been passed through 3 generations, and no one really engaged with them until we were like a year out from knowing their lease was up and knowing that they were ready to close the doors. And I was in that conversation and said, well, have you thought about employee ownership? And the owner was like, oh yeah, there's nobody here that we would trust to do that. And so clearly, right, it takes a while to build the leadership and think about that transition. But what about some of these folks who might think that they're so precious that they, their business couldn't possibly transition in that way?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it can't without proper planning. Right. So, I mean, that's our job. Like, we work with groups of workers to turn them into credible buyers of that business, bankable, credible buyers. They have a business plan. They know how the business makes money and where all the money goes. They present to loan committees from lenders and get financing, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, right? So they have to, first they need to see some examples of successful groups of workers who've done that, businesses. Again, that's the ownershiptransition.org website offers a lot of examples like that. So that they need to familiarize themselves with how it works and what the process is and what the supports are out there to help make it successful. You know, most business owners do not have MBAs, right? Like they themselves, how many mistakes did they make, right? So, the idea that their workers could tomorrow take over the business and run it as well as they do, no, that's not going to happen. But with proper planning, proper support, proper education and technical assistance, most any business, it's doable if there is interest. As I always say, where there's will, there's a way. So if there is interest and will to go through the process, the due diligence process, then we can help that group of workers become credible business buyers. But they got a plan.
Did that answer your question, Kate?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thought would be then, so it's more of working with the employees to get them ready to then do this rather than working with the owner, or you know what I mean? Like who initiates is in a perfect scenario, I guess everybody's on board, but yeah, in the situation I was referring to, it felt like the business owner couldn't see this being a viable option. And I don't know if he even attempted to engage in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you do need most everybody on board, right? I want to stress worker cooperative buyouts are willing buyer, willing seller transactions, and it is direct ownership. So, just as any other buyer or group of buyers who might come along and want to consider buying that person's business, they're gonna look under the hood. They're gonna pick it apart. They're gonna ask a lot of uncomfortable questions, right? They want to know what they're buying. And that takes time. And so what we do generally takes, I mean, a minimum of 6 months, much more typically 8, 10, oftentimes 12 months, easily 14 to 16 months. So, 6 months is kind of crazy, but we've done it. Give or take a few months, a year is the right amount of time needed to work with a group of workers to carry them through the process. And we do that with the business owner. We want the workers to be in charge. They're the ones buying it. But that business owner needs to be engaged as well. So I think it is a highly collaborative, very friendly process. I'm always impressed by seeing the business owners and how they were like, I didn't realize my own employees would step up in this way. And we hear that all the time, but they have to take the leap. They have to take the leap. And we do that first, we do a first meeting with a group of workers and just going to introduce the concept, explain what a worker cooperative is, explain how a buyout happens, explain the services and supports that we can provide over time to help them be successful. And then it's their choice too. It's not just the business owner's choice, right? We do have companies where the business owner was really into the idea. This is what they wanted for their business. This is what they wanted to do to treat their employees right. And it was the workers who no. So like I said, willing buyer, willing seller.
Kate, I wonder if even knowing that this is a possibility and kind of knowing some of the structure of it, if it gives all of us a little bit more information to maybe challenge some initial thoughts and saying, it might seem that way. Would you be open to hearing a little bit more about it and seeing some success stories? Because your employees might surprise you, and there's resources to help them get ready to be business owners. And then if there's just still absolutely no interest, then it probably wouldn't, I'm guessing it wouldn't be successful if there's not
Right.
that buy-in on both ends. We do have a question from the chat, from Jeremy. Sarah, is yours in response to this, or should I take your question after Jeremy's?
It's in response to this.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, I was just kind of piggyback on that. The education piece, like, and I think that's why, all of us in our own communities being able to have initial conversations, but also being able to celebrate and lift up success stories and talk about this as a viable option. I think it's really hard for people to see a path if they don't see examples. And that's, so much of the work that Rob is doing and the work that we're all sort of participating in the fellowship with. And so, and I think just challenging the maybe some preconceived notions about co-ops and like what that even means and all of that. So I actually just had a very similar conversation, Kate, with somebody in our community. And it was like, no, there's nobody. I'm like, no, you'd be really surprised. And I pushed and I pushed and he's gonna think about it, but it definitely takes some persistence, and I think just keeping the conversation like live in our communities, like kind of at all times, whatever it takes.
And I imagine the more that, and if we do have time within the questions, I'd love to call attention to kind of the strategy that Rob's group is taking in getting this information out there to the world, because I think it could actually be applied to other things as well. But certainly, like, the more that this gets ingrained in culture, the better, the more likely it is that folks won't be so intimidated by it. So Jeremy's question was, what do you feel is the largest challenge during a worker cooperative transition?
Ah, that's that I could write a book. It's if I had to name one thing, and this sounds vague, but if I had to name one thing as like the greatest challenge, the challenge is mindset. Business owners have a particular mindset about what it means to be a business owner. Workers have a particular mindset about what it means to be a worker. Those two things clash and they don't overlap very much. So shifting a business owner's mindset, to the previous question and conversation we were having, shifting a business owner's mindset to believe that with the right support, their employees, their workers do have the ability to do this in this structure, and also shifting employees' mindset to believe that yes, they are a worker, but they can also be an owner. And so that shift in mindset, there's no magic thing that makes that happen. It's really over time. It's a confidence building. A lot of it is confidence building. When a group, I particularly like to focus on financial education because I think that's one of the biggest confidence builders. When a group of workers who they just show up, punch in, punch out, do their job, they do it great, they collect their paycheck, but they have no clue how the business makes money. They don't understand the market, they don't understand the model, they don't understand the revenue or the expenses, right? So we have very simple ways to teach workers money in, money out. What is a profit and loss statement? How do you read it? What does it tell you? How do you use it to make decisions? And we do that with workaday folks. And that is one of I think the financial education piece is where I see the sharpest turn around that mindset, that all of a sudden they feel like the confidence that gets built from just learning that. They get the products, they get the business model, the market model, they get the customers, they know how the place works in that way, but they don't understand how it works financially. Once they can wrap their head around that, even in a simple way, there's a clear pivot right there in confidence that they can own that business together. So that's the mindset piece in a lot of different ways is a big deal. Also, I think the other big thing is as workers, they relate to each other in a particular way. And all of a sudden, they have to learn something very new about people they thought they knew very well as coworkers, because now they're thinking about how to be co-owners. And so again, that kind of follows on the mindset piece, but the work to build collaborative decision-making processes and good, how to have good meetings, conflict resolution, these things become like really critical if they're going to own a business together in a way that you can kind of give them, take it or leave it as coworkers. It's really not your problem if your coworker doesn't do that good a job, unless it like actually impacts your ability to do your good job, right? But right, all of a sudden, if you're owning a business together, these things matter in a way that they didn't matter before to you. You could just go home and grumble, right? Now you got to fix it.
Thank you, Rob. That was super helpful. Deb has a question in the chat. Who are the primary providers of capital to purchase the business? How do you overcome a commercial bank asking for employee owners to provide personal guarantees in order to approve loans?
Oh, great. Yeah, well, we don't ask commercial banks to do that because we just don't work with them because they can't do these deals. And no matter how much a commercial bank likes a particular business, no matter what the banking relationship history may be and how much they all love each other, from a regulatory perspective, they just can't get around commercial banking regulations to allow them to do these deals. So we only work with CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions. And there are a particular number of CDFIs that we work with. There is one commercial bank called National Cooperative Bank who understands that you cannot ask for personal guarantees in a worker cooperative because they're all equal. It's a membership-based corporation and they're all equal owners. So you can't go to the one who has the largest ownership stake and say, you need to sign your house away. It doesn't work. So we work with lenders who understand from the get-go, like that's table stakes, no personal guarantees. And that's the lenders that we work with. So in the Northeast, we have Cooperative Fund of the Northeast as a 45-year-old CDFI. As their name implies, they understand cooperatives, and we can just get right down to business with them because we don't have to explain the model. We don't have to have the conversation about personal guarantees because they know they don't get them. They're not going to ask for them. National Cooperative Bank is another example. They are a commercial bank and they're national, again, as the name implies. And there are others. There's other lenders. I could send a list around. There's a Local Enterprise Assistance Fund, LEAF. You can Google that one. They also are a national lender. Loans under $1 million, preferably well under $1 million, but they will go up to $1 million. CF&E will go up to $2.5 million, I think. So we work with a variety of lenders, but they're all CDFIs except for NCB, National Cooperative Bank, and they just understand what a cooperative is and how it works and what the ownership structure is, and therefore you cannot ask for personal guarantees.
It's a really practical question, Deb. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have about 3 more minutes for questions. What other questions do folks have? Rob, would it be okay with you if I shared those slides about your strategy for the Northeast Transition Initiative? It's like, okay, awesome. I just, with Radically Rural, I know all of us are working in different kind of aspects of rural vitality and success. And I think the strategy that you guys are using is pretty cool. So the first strategy is develop the small business ecosystem. So that's organize a fellowship program to educate, train, activate, and network the small business development ecosystem to support employee ownership, particularly in distressed urban and rural communities. And that is what is going on right now with the fellowship that I mentioned earlier that our employee Sarah is participating in. Then increase public awareness. I won't read all of this, but that's, go ahead.
Communications, marketing.
Communications.
Business owner outreach.
Exactly. And then training. So do you want to give like a one sentence about this part?
Yeah, well, we're actually, because we have like grant funds that we don't normally have access to, we are designing and scripting and platforming a whole library of training modules. They're not meant to be DIY. They are meant to be to sort of cleave off the content delivery part of a lot of what we do, so that we can then let them do that over their coffee in the morning or after they put their kid to bed at night. And then we can work with them, get right to the point around customization, implementation, practicing, building good policies and practices and habits. So that's what that is.
Perfect.
There's a lot to it, but that's what that is.
Yeah. And then measure the impact, document best practices, programmatic improvements, impact and outcomes achieved. And then finally, partnership capacity and development. So develop a partnership of core practitioners serving diverse communities and building shared strategies, systems and infrastructure to dramatically expand employee ownership in the Northeast. So the reason I thought that that was important to share is I do feel like there's many issues that we're working on, whether it's employee ownership or something completely different, that I thought that strategy was actually really powerful, and wanted to share it since we love sharing models that are working. And then Sarah asked, what keeps you going in this work?
I mean, my personal motivation is creating more and better jobs, helping workers build wealth, helping workers control their lives, and that's what drives me. It's work. I want to see work and livelihoods in this country do more good for the workers who actually do the work. And this is a very practical strategy to do it, and it's one that, like, I don't have to talk politics with anybody, right? Like, it's just everybody gets behind this. They're like, sure, yeah, okay, sounds good. So that's what motivates me.
I love that. So there's two more questions in the chat, but we have just 1 minute left, so we might just need to email those to you afterward and see if
Yeah.
maybe we could get back to folks individually.
Yeah.
But you know,
I did answer Maria's question. It's, I
Oh,
mean,
you
to
did?
do
Okay.
to do the transition, it's like a year, give or take several months. Like, maybe if you move it along and everything's in place, 8 months, 12 to 14 months is kind of typical to do that, to do
Perfect.
the full process that I was describing.
Awesome. And then Ren is asking, are there posters we can hang up at all the local libraries about the Northeast Transition Initiative?
We are doing things like that. So if you keep in touch, we can provide something. We just did sort of like a 2-page kind of glossy flyer kind of thing that
Yeah.
like a development office could have on their shelf or something. But yeah, we
Awesome.
can do all sorts of different things.
Well, thank you so much, Rob. We appreciate you being here with us and sharing with us. Thank you to everyone who attended. Certainly subscribe to our newsletter if you want to see more opportunities like this for engagement and also to get updates on our upcoming national summit. We'd love to have you there. It's a blast. It is one of those things that absolutely energizes you rather than drains you. And I know we could all use that. So have a wonderful day, everyone. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks all for coming.